The message that I've entitled this morning is Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. Fearfully and wonderfully made. When Jonathan was praying, he actually talked about the fact that we're born for a purpose, or born with a plan. And it made me think that might have been a good title for the message this morning as well, because we're not just fearfully and wonderfully made, we are born with a plan. God has a plan for our lives. The problem is that most people don't get into that plan, and you can manage to go through life without ever knowing what that plan is and without ever applying that plan to your life. But we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I want to say today that regardless of where we're born, the circumstances of our birth, the fact of the matter is that not only were you born with a plan, but you were born to be you. You're not born to be anyone else. You were born and are born to be you. This morning, we will be dedicating 2 children. At first, when we started this journey a few months ago, there was 1, then there were 2, then there were 3, then we're back down to 1, then we're back up to 3, now we're down to 2 today. But we finally got there, and we're looking forward to dedicating these 2 little children, and also praying for others in the families who have certain needs, and praying for them. Both of these children are unique. The word unique just simply means that they're different. That there may well be certain likenesses, but they are different. They are unique. They're not unique, they're not different because they come from different families, because children can be born into the same family, have the same set of parents, and still be different. And for those who have had 2 or more children, you know that's the case. That no 2 children are ever the same. Every child, even in your family, is unique. We're different. We're all different shapes, different sizes, different styles, different likes and dislikes, different smells, which might well be a problem for some of you right now, depending on who you're sitting beside. But you got to bear with that for a little longer. But we're all unique. We're unique, and I'll tell you why we're unique. We are unique because that's how God made us. God did not create a whole race of robots to make us all walk the same, talk the same, look the same. God created a human race of people, and even creation itself, that is unique. Watching some stuff during the week, and it's telling you how that, and the thoughts just come to my mind right now, so bear with me as I try to explain this. How that the seasons are apparently moving, and the spring is getting earlier, but the bees are not coming out in time for the flowers, and so they're not able to pollinate the flowers, and flowers, they say, are dying. And then they go on to make the point that the flowers need the bees to exist. So I'm thinking, okay, how did that work with evolution then? How did the flower just appear out of the ground, and all of a sudden the bees were there at the same time? But then you needed 3 or 4 different flowers in order to make it work. How did evolution make that happen? The fact is, God has created a creation with uniqueness set into it. He created a human race, human beings. We are unique. No 2 of us are the same. We may well have likenesses, but we are unique because God made us different. In Psalm 139 and verse 13, David wrote, "You created my inmost being." Most people, when they hear the Psalms or they read the Psalms, it's usually Psalm 23. A whole lot more Psalms than just Psalm 23. Great Psalm that it is, though. But 139 verse 13, he wrote, "You created my inmost being." In other words, you created the person that I am. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Imagine saying that about yourself. A few people here probably said it. You maybe say that about yourself every day. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm sure some of you men, even maybe some of you women as well, would declare that about yourselves. Look at me. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. It's as well that David in his day didn't have a phone and Facebook account. Otherwise, the Psalms would be covered with his selfie photographs. If that's the kind of language he's talking about himself. You know, at first, I didn't get selfies. I really didn't. You know, everybody posing, taking their own photographs, putting them out on Facebook. Taking a photograph of yourself and putting it on Facebook. I didn't get that. But the one that I really don't get is when you're standing in front of a mirror and you're taking a photograph of yourself in the mirror, taking a photograph of you taking a photograph of yourself. It's like, what kind of people are we breeding here? And if you have a photograph like that on your Facebook account, you really need to take a look at it, or take a look at yourself. Take a look at it. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. But let me be fair to David. David was not a poser like many people are. David was not a poser. David was simply making a statement of fact. He was acknowledging his own uniqueness. He's saying, I am fearfully and I'm wonderfully made. And you know what? We can all say the same about ourselves, about each other. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, because that's how God made us. The Bible shows us that while we were created in the image and the likeness of God, every one of us, it doesn't matter what you do at the weekend, it doesn't matter what you do from Monday right through to Sunday. You were created in the image and the likeness of God. You do with what you want with that. That's your choice. But that's how God created you. You were created, as John said, with a plan. Whether you buy into that plan or not, that's your choice. But the fact of the matter is that we were created in the image and the likeness of God, but we were also created to be different. The two children before us today are among those who safely made it through the womb. And so they've arrived safely on planet Earth. Today we will applaud people who will cross the finish line on the marathon, whether they do it within 2 hours and a few minutes or they do it in 10 or 12 hours. People will be applauded when they come through the finishing line because they made it through, 26 miles? Is that what it is? With a little bit there as well. But people will be applauded for finishing the marathon. What about applauding every child that makes it through the womb, makes it to life, where it can see the open sky, can see the humans around it, it can experience the life beyond the womb itself. And so these two little kids, they've made it, and we certainly welcome them. So for them, so far, so good. But life does get difficult even beyond that. We understand that also. Now, these two children obviously look like someone. And no doubt there are those that have peered into the faces and have said, well, you have your daddy's nose. You have your mummy's eyes. And we'll get through stuff like that. And we look for the likenesses, and we look especially for the likeness of mother and father, and I'll not make any jokes about that because we're in church this morning. But they already look like someone. And as they grew up, they will pick up behaviors and they will pick up words. Behaviors and words spoken by their parents, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, their brothers, their sisters, and those within the community. Those within their sphere of influence, they will pick up those behaviors and those spoken words. And they will become more like those around them. But yet, regardless of that, each of these two children are still unique. Each one is different. But one of the things that they share in common is that they have no say regarding the world into which they're born. No one chooses whether they're going to be born the Falls Road or the Shankill Road, whether they're going to be born on the Israeli side of the wall or the Palestinian side of the wall. No one has the choice whether they're going to be born black or white or any other color that exists on this planet. No one has that choice. But yet, as these children grow, they will be faced with situations where they will have to make choices. And the influence that will be brought to bear on these children will determine the choices that they will make and the kind of persons that they become. And so I'm asking you a question this morning: how will you influence these children? How will you, as parents, as family members, as friends, as a community, how will we influence these children? I asked that question, but I also threw out the challenge to be careful as to how you influence them and also how you influence others, because we influence people. It doesn't matter who you are, what life you're living, you influence people around you. And that can either be for good or not so good. The Bible tells us that there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end of that way is death. You see, some people may say, well, there's no problem with me leading these children this way because it seems right to that particular person. But I tell you, just because it seems right to you does not make it right. Just because it seems right to me does not make it right. It's why that we're told that there's a way that seems right, but the way leads to death. I know that we live in an ever-changing world. This world is changing. The world that we live in today is not the world that I was brought up in when we were brought up in Brown Square so many, many years ago. We live in a different world. Different values, different standards. It's a totally different world. The world is forever changing. And why is the world changing? I'll tell you why. It's because it's going somewhere. This world of ours is going somewhere. The human race is going somewhere. At one time, the church used to get on the knack because we talked about the end times. We talked about the coming of the end of the world as we know it. We talked about the end of time. We talked about ultimate destruction coming upon the planet and so on. The church has talked like this for hundreds of years, going right back even to the life of Jesus Christ upon this earth. But now it's not the church is talking that way. There are people that are telling us that we've only got the 2050 at maximum. And then there are those that are telling us if we don't destroy the earth itself, then something outside beyond the earth is going to be destroying the planet anyway. And so we have all of these doomsayers beyond the church. And yet the message that we bring is not one of destruction, but one of hope. We sang about hope. Holding on to that hope. We have hope. If you're not a Christian, you have no hope. That's it. Paul says that we were in the world without God and without hope. So you're in the world. If you don't have God, then the Bible says you don't have hope. You'll get past the day, you'll get past the week. You might do okay. You get a good house, get a good car on the road and so on. And that's fine. But life is much, 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 much more than that. But we're going somewhere. Do you know that the earth is traveling? This earth, you're sitting here right now. It looks like you're not moving. But do you know that this earth is traveling 67,000 miles per hour? 67,000 miles per hour. So that by this time tomorrow, within 24 hours, we will have traveled 1.6 million miles. And some of you say you never get anywhere. That's the speed you're going at right now. 67,000 miles per hour right now. And then by this time tomorrow, you'll be virtually back in the same spot, but you'll have covered 1.6 million miles. See, we just think of the earth spinning. It's not just spinning, it's traveling through space. But friends, I want to say that the world is not just a planet on a journey through space and around the sun, because that's where it's going every year. But the world is a living community. It's a living community of people. People of different colors, different languages, different shapes and sizes, different genders and no genders. Do you know that there are now registered around 75 different genders? And some of those are non-genders. When I said that we live in a different world from one we lived in Brown Square, that's a different world, believe me. But we live in a world that is a community of people who are traveling together as fellow earth travelers. We're fellow earth travelers. We are fellow space travelers, all of us. We're time travelers. Look at the distance we're going to cover in 24 hours. And we're doing this together. We're on a journey. We're on a journey from the moment that we're born, and we continue that journey until the day that we die. But hear me, friends, the day you die is not the end of the journey. The day you die is not the day that the journey comes to an end. That's the moment that your eternity begins in full view and full focus. Focus. The moment you were born, you began an eternal life, a life that will last for eternity. But the big question is where? See, this is the world that these children were born into. This is the world that will influence these children. But let me say this, friends, that they are who they are because of birth. You are who you are because of birth. Hey, I put a few decades on from the day that I was born, and a few more than a few decades. But I've put a number of decades on from the day that I was born, but I'm still the same person. I'm still Jack McKee. I used to be called Jackie McKee, but Jack sounds a bit more masculine. I used to be Jackie until I went to Bible college, and then I was speaking at some churches and youth events in England, and when they introduced me as Jackie McKee and I jumped up, everybody started to laugh, and finally when I asked the question, why? Because the English call girls Jackie and call boys Jack. So I changed my name in Bible college from Jackie to Jack. That was where all that really happened. But you are who you are because of birth. But you're the kind of person that you are because of choices that you make. Give me a few minutes and we'll finish. You are the kind of person you are because of choices that you make. So my challenge to you this morning is, don't fit into someone else's mold. Don't be someone else's clone. Don't do things just to try to fit in. See, that's the ploy of the devil. To try to make you feel like you need to fit in. You need to fit in your community. You need to fit in to those few people within your class situation, within your work situation, within the club, the pub, or even sometimes within church. You need to fit in. And that's the ploy of the devil, just to get you to try to fit in. Let me tell you about two people called Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb were two young men who were born into slavery. And came the day that God took them out under the leadership of Moses, took them out of Egypt. And when they came out of Egypt, they didn't fit into the mold that was been set that most other people were prepared to fit into. They didn't fit into the mold of those who became just a massive bunch of complainers, and you always get them. Moses faced it. Moses and Joshua became, or at that time it was Moses and Aaron. Moses actually wore a wig. Do you know that? Because it says sometimes it's with Aaron and sometimes without Aaron. But there was Moses. My apology for that one. There was Moses and there was Aaron. And they were seen at that time to be the leaders of the people. But they couldn't even get past the first major obstacle of the Red Sea without the people complaining. And Joshua and Caleb were not prepared to fit into that mold. While others saw giants, they saw God. While others saw problems, they saw solutions. While others rebelled, these two men remained faithful. While others moaned, they remained loyal. While others saw reason not to go into Canaan, they saw every reason to go into Canaan. Why? Because they made a choice that they were not going to fit the mold. You don't need to fit the mold. One of the reasons Jack McKee's got problems in so many different places is because he doesn't fit the mold. I fit nobody's mold. I don't even fit the religious mold. I don't fit the mold. I want to tell you, friends, God is not looking for people who will fit the mold. He's not looking for people who will fit the religious mold of smells and bells. God is looking for those who are bold enough to be different. Bold enough to be different. To be different in a world that is void of real morals. And I'll tell you, the morals of our planet, the morals of our human race have completely and totally changed. Different in a world, but also sometimes different in a church where instead of just kind of sitting back, taking our ease in church, and becoming a nominal Christian, let's seek to be different. Not to stand out just because we want to stand out. Hey, look at me, it's all about me. It's not about me. It's about knowing what God has put in your heart and God has put in your life and being different because God has called you to be different. And so God is looking for Joshua's and Caleb's. God is looking for Peter's and Paul's and Martin Luther's and Martin Luther King Jr.'s, and He's looking for people who will not fit the mold, but then that comes with a challenge. It comes with a challenge to step up and step out in order to make a difference. You can be different just for the sake of being different. Or you can be different for the purpose of making a difference. And that's what God wants for these children and for you today. That not only would you see yourself as fearfully and wonderfully made, not only would you see yourself as different, but you'd see yourself as being different for the purpose of making a difference and making a positive difference. And it begins, and I finish with this, it begins with surrendering your life to Christ. That's where it starts. When you truly surrender your life to Jesus Christ and you follow through that surrender, then you will automatically become different. You will not need to try to stand out. You will stand out. The day that I decided that I was going to commit my life to Jesus Christ was the day that I decided to follow Jesus. That was it. My purpose was not to become a church-attending Christian. Because I'd seen them, even way back then, I'd seen them driving through the streets in the cars, parking the cars, getting into church, back out of the cars, driving away again from the community. And I didn't ever want to be that kind of person, just coming to church, going away, coming to church, going away. I wanted to be a follower of Jesus Christ. You know what Jesus did? He went to where the people were. He walked among them. He connected with them on a daily basis. So Jesus says this, even about surrendering Him, because it's not a point of bending the knee and asking for forgiveness. That's the starting point. But He says this, if you truly do want to come after me, then take up your cross and follow me. He wasn't talking about a wooden cross. He was talking about that willingness to lay down your life for the sake of the gospel. Take up your cross and follow me, He said. Friends, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. You were born to be different from the world and in the world. But you were born to be like Christ. That's the plan. That's the plan. You were born to be like Christ. The Bible says we are predestined. And I'll probably get a big discussion about this on Facebook later on, but I'll throw it out. It's amazing how things just kind of come to you at a moment when I wasn't even going to talk about predestination, but all of a sudden it's right there. We're told that we are predestined. You know, some people interpret that as meaning some are predestined to be saved and some are predestined not to be saved. I don't see it that way. You read the whole verse. Predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. In other words, this is God's purpose. This is God's plan. The ultimate plan is that we would be like Christ. Predestined to be conformed to the image of Christ. That's the destiny. That's the purpose. That's the plan for every single one of us. And so He calls us to surrender. He calls us to follow Him. He calls us to be like Him. And so I ask the question for you today, right now, as I finish. What's it going to be from this moment when you walk out that door? Is it going to be same old, that nothing ever changes? Or is a change going to take place because today God spoke to your heart, God spoke to your life, and the day you made a choice, you'll follow Jesus Christ? We can't ask these children to surrender to Jesus this morning. Can't do that, won't do that. We'll tell you what we can do and what we will do. We can ask you, and we will ask you to do that.